Hi, and welcome to the Brohoyo podcast. And unfortunately, you failed your 50-50 because we are off banner this week. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co host, David.
Hey everyone.
And this off banner, we're going to talk about Rogue Trader, the Warhammer CRPG. Spoilers from this point forward. We don't have any other spoiler warning. This is it. So if you don't want to hear about or get spoiled on Rogue Trader, now's the time to bail. But otherwise, please stick with us on the journey. Um, as for you know Warhammer itself, I've been playing Warhammer for about 20 years now, which is probably a big giveaway as far as my age. But longtime fan, have multiple armies, read the books, Horse Heresy, so on and so forth. So big Warhammer nerd here. But Dave, what's your experience with the franchise?
Rogue Trader. Rogue Trader is my first foray into the Warhammer universe. And I guess actually now that I'm saying that, that's technically not true. My first foray would have been not Vermintide, but what was their equivalent?
Oh, Darktide.
Darktide. Yeah, Darktide was, I guess, technically my first jumping into of 40K, but let's be honest, that game for me, I was not trying to learn lore. That was just a fun, let's play with friends, chaos, see how long we can survive, shoot and kill things, right? I wasn't playing that game for any type of plot. But this was my first real foray into it, I would say, in terms of a lore dump, was Rogue Trader. I went in completely blind. I just saw this game pop up on Xbox's Game Pass, and I looked into kind of what it was. Oh, it's a strategy RPG. It was described in one of the reviews I was reading as Baldur's Gate 3 light. Like if Baldur's Gate wasn't able to be in production for 10 years and have the backing that it had, or if Rogue Trader conversely had 10 years of production and had the backing that Baldur's Gate 3 had, that's what it would be, type thing. And I loved Baldur's Gate 3. And so I said, yeah, let's give this a go. And yeah, I dove in completely blind.
Okay. So just out of question, as someone who is completely new to, or functionally completely new to the series, did you find it, Rogue Trader in the universe and so on and so forth? Did you find it impenetrable? Was there any like points of confusion? I know that the game, because I've beaten the game myself as well. I know it does provide like definitions for certain proper nouns and so forth, but did you find those helpful? I guess, to what degree did you find Rogue Trader welcomed you to the Warhammer universe?
Yeah, so my initial impressions on the Warhammer universe is it's massive, absolutely massive. And there is definitely a lot to take in and a lot to pick up on pretty quickly. They really throw you into the fire and are throwing terms around at you. But what I do appreciate, and you kind of alluded to this, is that in the dialogue, anything that is kind of lore specific or something that, like me, somebody who's not familiar with Warhammer wouldn't know, is usually bolded or colored in like orange text or something like that, letting you know that, hey, this is something important, and you can typically mouse over it or click on it or something, and the in-game, the in-game dictionary essentially, or journal or whatever, will pop up and kind of have a more expanded description of what that word is, or who that person is, if it's a person, or who that faction is, or whatever have you. And then they also let you know, the other thing I appreciate too is in those dialogue, there's then some text that's blue. And when you hover over that, the blue text lets you know that this is happening because of a decision me, the player, made at some point. And it tells you in general what decision you had made that caused this particular character to say this thing or act this way or whatever have you. And so that's really cool that there is because a lot of games do stuff like your choices reflect the outcomes, Baldur's Gate 3, Mass Effect, things of that nature, Dragon Age, stuff like that. But they don't always tell you, hey, this is what you did to cause this to happen, and you're just kind of left to speculate. And sometimes it may be obvious, but this specifically spelled out, hey, this person is more thinks more logistically about things because you did this. This person has a softer, has a place for compassion because you were more merciful or something like that. And I did appreciate that. But to go back to the main question, the world throws a lot at you, but they do help you out with some things. Now, throughout my gameplay, experience, which took me 80. It was the save file isn't in pure hours. They do it in like number of days and then hours. So it was like
Mhm.
came out to like 84 hours. And to clarify, I did not have any DLCs. This was just the base game. So it took me 84 hours. So throughout my 84-hour playthrough, yeah, there were multiple instances of I'm lost. I need to go back and look something up, or let me, even within the same dialogue, let me scroll up to go back to the beginning and just reread this, because there's a lot of decisions like when you're definitely like when you're dealing with your planetary outposts
Mm.
and an event occurs and you're choosing between the factions or trying to find a middle ground or something like that. They throw a lot at you very quickly, and it's okay, well, this side sounds reasonable in this regard, and then this side sounds reasonable in this regard, and then they'll throw in somebody's name, and I'm like, wait, was that person on side A or side B?
Yeah.
So let me scroll back up. So there was a lot of that in the experience there. But in general, I think they did a good job bringing a newbie along and keeping us up to speed. Any confusion or slow to figure things out is my own ineptitude and stupidity sometimes.
Okay, I mean, yeah, fair enough. So I think one of the better lenses to kind of go through the what I want to cover will be through the companions, because each companion kind of, for the most part, gives you a nice little window into the 40K universe. It's different factions, different aspects of the lore. So I'm just going to go through them sort of in order of like as they appear roughly. And we'll just talk about each one, sometimes briefly, sometimes more in depth, and maybe do a little bit of conversation about lore aspects as they come up. So let's start with the man himself, Abelard. So how did you feel about Abelard? Your number two.
Yeah, so for Abelard, I really enjoyed his story, because you don't really get his character or his companion quest unlocked until later on in the game, when there's some other political things going on your main capital world. But I did really enjoy that storyline, and seeing kind of the politically warring families and them being loyal and the hardworking family. Uh, and then when we got to that story, which comes into questioning their loyalty, because there's a scenario that's played out that makes it look like they did something bad, and it's
Mhm.
up to us, Rogue Trader, to investigate and figure that out. That story quest line I really enjoyed, and then his devotion to his family as well was really nice. So I liked it in that regards, but for him, the character, he is kind of that like grandfatherly figure to the Rogue Trader, I felt.
Mhm.
And early on in the game, when you don't have hardly any party members, so he came out with me a lot in the early game. And then I would probably say once I got Heinrichs, Abelard kind of disappeared from going out with me into quests.
Okay.
So I didn't get to use him much late game in terms of like his contributions in game. Also, I do want to clarify on this playthrough, my main character, my character was the officer archetype. So I do want to clarify that as well. So when we're talking about what characters I used or didn't use, you may think like, oh, this character is awesome. Why wouldn't you use them? It's like, well, because maybe I had that role filled because of what I am, or maybe like something to that effect. So it is worth noting, officer archetype. And so that doesn't affect Abelard in this case. I still wanted to preface that.
It is also worth noting which of the three, dogmatic, heretic, or iconoclast, which of the three did you do?
Yeah, so for this playthrough, I tried to be a good guy as best as possible. So Iconoclast is what I went through and played as.
Mhm.
And then my secondary trait was Dogmatic, right? Because the way it works, there's 5 tiers for each one, but once you get to tier 3, the most either of the other two can get to is the second tier. And so I got Iconoclast maxed out. Dogmatic, I got to tier 2, and then Heretical, I think I didn't make too many heretical choices this particular playthrough. I think if I were to go back and play through it again, maybe I do a heretical playthrough, because that'll be a bit more challenging from my understanding, because heretical choices are definitely at odds with a majority of your party and their own alignment. But Iconoclast for this playthrough.
Okay. Um, I guess since we're on the subject of the three branches, sort of, you mentioned that Iconoclast was sort of the good guy branch, which I kind of find funny because within the 40K universe, Iconoclast is very much so not the good guy branch.
Oh,
Like,
really? Okay.
yeah, Dogmatic would really be the quote unquote good guy choice because that would be the way that everybody would kind of expect you to act. Like, you're supposed to be the dogmatic, like, hey, might makes right, follow these decisions. People who are lower on the um, feudal chain are, there for a reason. And sort of the brutal repressive regime that it is, making dogmatic decisions would be, at least in universe, considered.
Yeah, I was gonna say to your point. Yeah, in universe, yeah, what you're saying makes sense. I would say as a good guy from our own real life standards and moral approaches, the Iconoclast leans more towards freedom, both in lifestyles and expressions, and letting people do what they want to do, and a little bit more compassion. But yeah, based off of a bunch of things that happened in the ending, as I was reading it, yeah, I would say not necessarily viewed as the good guy by those powers that be in the universe, I guess is the best way to phrase that.
Yeah, it's a repressive.
People love me, but the powers that be.
Yeah, they're not as much of a fan. And then heretic or heretical would have been. It's pretty clearly the chaotic evil. Like, it's all about power and so on and so forth. I that would be one minor quibble that I have about the game, is that it doesn't, at least from my experience, a lot of the early heresy choices don't they don't always feel like they're, slippery slope into evil. It feels like you're choosing the haha, I'm going to be mustache twirlingly evil. But yeah, that's again a minor quibble. But anyways, having covered that, let's move on to the second companion, which is Idara, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's been a minute since I played the game.
Yeah. So those two caveats aside, jumping back into companions for our resident unlicensed or unregistered psyker or whatever, however they refer to them in universe. She's not of the official.
Yeah, she is unsanctioned.
Unsanctioned. That's the word. I was close. So Idara, she is she stayed in my party the entire campaign. I always used her. She started out. I started her as kind of being one of my main DPS people because her abilities just they were cool. Who doesn't love psychic abilities? Doing a bunch of damage, not having any problems hitting people. She would just hit. Whereas maybe early on, Argenta or other weapon users just were like 50 or 60% chance to hit. It's like, what are we doing here? But then as the game progressed and went on, I actually changed up her build a couple times and ended up having her be more of a supporter, and using her psychic abilities to buff teammates, giving them various dodge parry bonuses, bonuses to willpower, fellowship, and intelligence, bonus action points, stuff like that. And then basically using her for damage secondary, just as but for her personality and such, she, as one of the, if not the only heretical character in your retinue, it opened up some gear for her that nobody else could use, so that was cool. Because a lot of this gear you get that's locked behind certain idolatry or however that is, reputation or whatever it's called in the game.
Yeah.
Because otherwise heretical stuff was useless because nobody else was really that until much later on in the game. But then they're limited for other reasons, which we can get into. But for her, yeah, it's interesting. Somebody hears voice in their heads and sometimes speaks to them or is reacting to them. Interesting character, led to some fun exchanges, witnessed between characters as you're walking around the map and such. But yeah, I really enjoyed that character. And then for her companion quest, I did not have her become a mindless puppet. She did not put on the helm that you do towards the end of the game. So I did ultimately leave it up to her. I didn't force her to do it because there's 3 dialogue options. You can just tell her no. You can force her to do it, or you can leave it up to her, and she chooses free will. So that's how she concluded for me.
Fair enough. She's actually one of my least favorite characters. I actually don't usually mind psychers. I can find them kind of fun. in the 40k universe. But I was not a fan of her. So she's usually the first character that I end up cutting when I finally get a more than full team. Um,
I
so
will I will say for her, she definitely the psyker gimmick in battle with the levels of the veil.
mhm.
I was not aware that that was a thing. I learned pretty quickly on in one of like the first when you're leaving Rios Mayorkas,
Uh-huh.
when or Minoris or whatever it is, when the moon is about to get stolen or the sun's about to get stolen,
Mhm.
and basically your first like big oh shit moment.
Yep.
Um, that is when I learned about the veil, and it made that fight a lot harder than it should have been. Because I was not paying attention to my veil degradation, and it was like up over 20, and I had her use a major thing, and
Perils of the Warp. Yep.
oh yeah, it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best, but we got through it, and we paid a lot more attention to our veil level from then on.
Yeah. 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 That can be an eye opener. Right? That happened to me my first playthrough as well. I was playing through and I wasn't really paying attention to it. And at the end of the prologue, when you fight the Chaos Spawn, I was going hard and heavy with those psychic powers and accidentally summoned a bunch of other stuff too. Like it was not good. It didn't go well for me. Um,
Also really worth noting too, as far as difficulty level, because I know there's a couple different ones. I didn't go with the hardest difficulty level. I think I went with there's like 5
mhm.
in total. I think so. I think I went with the fourth one. I did not go with the hardest. I think I went with the next hardest one, and I don't know what they're all called, but number 4 out of 5.
No problem. Okay. Moving on right along. Sister Argenta, the Sister of Battle. The Battle Nun.
He is my MVP and carried me through this game. You can maybe argue like ops abilities giving her multiple turns is the real reason she's the MVP,
Mhm.
but she is an absolute beast in combat for me, at least for my playthrough. So she in combat, I built her to be. She used heavy bolt weapons,
Mhm.
and which were surprisingly scarce throughout the game. But once I found a heavy bolt one, it was on. Oh, it was fantastic. It's just so many shots. And then I think the one that I ended up sticking with, its passive was every kill she gets increases the rate of fire by 1. And
Ooh,
so for
yeah.
her rapid fire ability, she's pumping out stupid good damage. And there were literally multiple fights as we got towards the end of chapter 5, which is the end of the game, that literally took 1 round, because I found a nasty combo where I put an accessory on her that gave her first action every time. And so she would go first, do her bit, and then Cassia would go second. Spoiler alert, I used Cassia a lot throughout the game. And then Cassia would just, by that point, have the momentum to do her act of heroism. Here you go, Argenta. Here's a completely full second turn. Oh, you didn't kill everything in that full second turn? Here's 2 extra action points. Go clean up whatever you didn't finish. I had multiple fights that literally just those 2 moved, fight was over. But yeah, Argenta, like gaming wise, my MVP. As far as story wise, lore wise for her, any religious guns blazing zealot type is gonna be interesting to me. It's gonna be fun. So enjoyed her companion quest and her journey, essentially kind of a redemption for herself, because she was like the only one, I guess, to survive some incident that occurred in the past from her group, and then going back and revisiting that, and then learning more about that. She had an interesting backstory to me, and she, unfortunately, being the good guy, being the nice guy in real world values, right?
Mhm.
Her ending was actually kind of sad. The one that I got for her was actually a little bit sad, because she goes and she finds her own sect, essentially, of battle sisters, and goes on to be awesome, do awesome things. But because, like you mentioned, I'm iconoclast, which is not smiled upon by those that are more dogmatic, which she very much is, and her groups are that she associates with. Her followers want her to distance herself from me, or to publicly, shun me, and she refuses to do so. in the ending that I got. And so because she refused to do so, she ends up having to like she steps down from her leadership role and goes and lives in isolation. Granted, she still looked upon very positively, but the fact that her loyalty to me from our interactions and how my story went, I was a little sad. Like it was the first of a few that I will probably talk about of my ending branches that just show how brutal this universe and this world is. That is 40K.
Yeah, Sister Argenta is a favorite of mine. Peek behind the curtain, I do have a Sisters of Battle army, so I do enjoy the Sisters archetype. And yeah, she's a fun one. I do also want to mention that I find an interesting little piece of a nugget that can easily be missed is one of the issues that she has. And you find out about it, I believe, early in chapter 2, is that as part of warp travel, she was sent to guard a relic, and as a result of warp travel, she ends up arriving like 50 to 100 years after when she's supposed to, because time moves weird in the warp. So by the time she shows up, they've already sent like another group of people to protect it. So she kind of shows up and is like, okay, I'm here to protect the relic. What do you mean that I'm 100 years late and there's already a bunch of people protecting it and I'm basically just sitting around with nothing to do? Like, that's cool, great. Which I find is a fun nod to the fact that warp travel is inherently inconsistent and can cause weird shenanigans and mess with time in that way, where you can technically arrive before you left, thanks to moving through the warp. But anyways,
since you talk about warp real quick, I just want to interject this very quickly because you bring up warp travel. So in terms of overworld map movement and traveling between different sectors and different areas, the routes that you take can range from safe to like hazardous and deadly. I appreciate that once you got essentially into the mid game, you had enough navigator points to make every route safe, because being in the middle of a story quest and like trying to reach the pinnacle or the climax of that particular chapter and then having it be interrupted because you have to go to a different planetary system and the warp path that you take is yellow, so therefore there's a chance of something happening and then you have to go do a fight or something, really broke up the immersion of the story. And so the fact that essentially after chapter 3, and because you don't have any travel in chapter 3 because
reasons,
we can get into that in a little bit too, about thoughts of chapters, the story, and pacing. But after chapter 3 and you get back to traveling planetary, you have enough navigator points where you can literally make every route you're going to be on safe and therefore not have to deal with those. Yes, it cuts down experience. Yes, it cuts down loot that you get. But for time and immersion purposes, I appreciated that they weren't making you pick and choose which routes to make safe. You could just essentially do them all.
Yeah, I mean, no, you're good. From a lore perspective, it's one of those where that really shouldn't happen, but from a gameplay perspective, it was the right decision. Yeah. Okay, so again, we've got we've got 7 more.
Who's next?
So we'll go with Cassia.
So like I mentioned with spoiler alert, she was in my retinue, in my party, in my team throughout the entire game. Really enabled my Argenta to do what she does. From a combat perspective, she was more of the strategist build for me, so putting down the zones. Basically, she would put down zones. She would use the ability that pulls all the characters, makes them run together. I would toss it over to Argenta now that they're all grouped up. Burst fire, boom them all down. She does her little psychic navigator scream that she does for some damage. And at the end of the game, I had a staff that let her do that essentially twice, and it would do more damage the second time, plus damage to herself. And so boom, boom, she hits. By that time, she's built up enough momentum for her heroic act. Throw another turn to Argenta, a full turn to Argenta, and then maybe Argenta has enough of her own to use her own heroic act to then take an additional turn inside of her own additional turn. It got pretty stupid, that combo. So really abused that and helped trivialize quite a few fights, if I'm being honest. As far as lore-wise, character-wise, when we're introduced to her, you can already tell there's some internal family strife going on in terms of her being sheltered versus exposure to the outside world, outside of her family and their platoon. And then where her story quest really picks up for the companion quest is when her own family tries to kill her. And I believe this was chapter 4. I think is when that occurs.
Sounds right.
Or yeah, it
It's
wasn't in
been a
chapter
minute.
3 because not a lot, not a
Yeah.
lot of companion stuff happens in chapter 3. Again, we can dive into that later. But chapter 4, I think, is when that all occurs, and how that shakes down and what you do there is very pivotal to how she reacts going forward. Of all the characters, she was maybe the one I was actually most interested in attempting to romance. And again, going in blind, I didn't know anything about
Mhm.
romancing options and if they were all player sexual or if they had specific preferences. And they do have specific preferences. And she unfortunately only goes for male rogue traders, and I was playing a female rogue trader. So she was not interested in me in that way. But
So I can give you at least a little bit of solace. As a male rogue trader, it generally doesn't work out because she is a navigator, and as such, she needs to marry into other navigators in order to maintain the bloodline of their special third eye that lets them navigate the warp. So for the most part, it typically ends not great.
see, as somebody who's blind to 40K lore,
Yeah.
that is something that I did not pick up on or did not know about, or maybe could not have known about, because I did not romance her. But from a lore perspective, yeah, all of that is very interesting with the third eye, and then her having like, I'm gonna call it a tesseract, but that's not
Mhm.
what it was. Whatever it was called, that she had like the big one and was going to be the leader of all navigators for
Mhm.
her family type stuff. For her companion quest, I didn't kill. I killed the aunt or the sister, who actually facilitated trying to assassinate her.
Mhm.
I did not kill the patriarch because I felt he was kind of oblivious to this all and didn't actually facilitate anything. It's just he was old and not on top of it like he should have been to
Mhm.
like quell that. But I didn't attribute him to anything malicious. Like, was pretty obvious that the sister or cousin or whoever that was trying to do. So he stayed alive, and the sister or cousin died. And then when you get to the part of the companion quest where you're going to the planet, you're going to the big Tesseract artifact thing to like awaken stuff or whatever, and you get the run in with the Xenos. I ended up kind of purifying the thing and quote unquote breaking the cycle, as it were.
Mhm.
So it appeased the Xenos and it appeased her as well. Again, trying to be iconoclast and be the good guy, find the good answer by real world standards, not Warhammer 40K standards. So that was Cassia.
Okay. All right. Don't have much to add there. I'll jump straight forward to Pascal.
Pascal. So, he, depending on who was available in my party, he would be in it or he would be subbed out. He was basically, to put it in basketball terms, he was the sixth man. He was the first man off the bench, and then to come in for a character that was maybe out for some reason, or I felt that this was going to be something that needed a lot more tech use than I had outside of Pascal. So he was kind of a bruiser type for me. So he try and shoot from range when we can, but wasn't afraid to get in there with his huge hammer and slam the ground a few times. And then a bounty hunter. So basically, his job was throw up your hunter's marks on people, put exploits on people, and then let Argenta do the rest, or Irlet. So from a character perspective, from a lore perspective, I found him to be very humorous because just the machines essentially have a logistical approach to everything, like everything logistics to a T. Nothing else matters, just logistics. So some of the quips and the one-liners he has, and factually or incorrect, or but the times he would pipe up with some one-liners was comical to me. As far as his character companion quest, you learn more about how he's essentially, to use another analogy, but this one from Harry Potter, he's essentially a Horcrux of the big, machine, leader type, or and he's of, I guess, he was Judgment, I guess, was his
Yes.
oversight.
So, yeah.
That's how they described it. Everybody had a different trait, like the seven little dwarfs, and his was Judgment.
Yeah. Basically, so I realize I haven't done a lot to describe or set this up for listeners, so I'm gonna have to put photos in. whenever I mention names whenever this goes live, and I have to edit it all. But Pascal is a tech priest. He's a priest who worships technology. With the kind of the joke being is that it's all a cargo cult. Like the people who work the machinery in the Imperium don't really understand how loud this works. They just kind of do things because that's the way it's to be done. As far as Pascal himself goes, he's technically a sub piece of a Gestalt mind, where a bunch of tech priests linked themselves together neurally to create one entity, and then they decided to split apart. And when they did, instead of going back to being who they were, they basically subdivided the emotions and thoughts and feelings of that Gestalt mind. So it wasn't like Tom and Steve and Harry and all these people, they all went back to being Tom, Steve, and Harry. It was, no, you became Rage. You are the Rage of Tom, Steve, and Harry. All three of their rage go into you. Okay, you're Justice. You're the Justice of those three all into there. So that, again, it's one of those where, like, I don't know if you weren't in 40K, you'd kind of get what was going, like what they talked. Yeah.
So for his companion quest, they do explain it. I did pick up on that. That was something I completely understood. And like I said, I think his thing was justice or judgment or something. That was his niche. There was somebody else that was like lazy, and somebody else that was, compassionate or greed, like all those things. So I completely got that. And then for his companion quest, for his ending, essentially it comes to, you find out whatever it was they were working on is kind of heretical in theory. And so I had him kind of purge all of that data from his system, so that nobody would have remembered it or do it or be able to reference it in the future. And then I think in the ending, there was like a one-liner bit about the person that you fight got that information or was able to keep that information or not completely purge it, and then like took it and was never heard from again, like escaped and it was never heard from again type thing. But that was Pascal. I don't have too much to dive into because I'll be honest, the tech priest lore throughout the game was something I was constantly having to reference and double back reference again, because a lot of it was I was getting lost and getting it confused with other stuff. So I can't expand too much more beyond that, beyond how I used them in combat and what I thought of them, and then how the companion quest ended. Just because, again, I literally had to reference every time a tech priest was involved, or like the Opticon 22, or there was the one fight you have to do with one of the tech priests on your own ship. I had to like look up a lot of stuff, like, where is this even coming from? But yeah, so that's Pascal in a nutshell. So I'll just leave that there.
No, you're good. And again, some of it can be kind of weird and confusing because a lot of things within the Imperium like reference the God Emperor and sort of the religion, and then the tech priests are kind of from out of nowhere. They're their own sub religion, sub empire within the Imperium. It's a whole thing where we don't need to get into it, but they don't graft nicely into the Imperium in general. But yeah, let's move on to Henrix. Just to, again, brief description for our listeners. He is a Inquisitor, someone who is basically think a more KGB than CIA or FBI agent. But yeah, Dave?
Yeah, so Heinrichs, he was somebody, the game kind of intonated that I should be skeptical of the Inquisition a little bit. Like you mentioned, more KGB as opposed to FBI, in terms of just, because when people generally hear KGB, they definitely associate that with like, I can't trust that. Like, and when people hear FBI, yes, there are going to be some people that don't trust the FBI at all, right? Because they just don't trust the powers that be. But the FBI generally has a more positive, because it's our guys type thing, right?
Yeah.
And the Inquisition wasn't giving me the FBI type vibes, right, in terms of that analogy, right? Not a perfect analogy, but that's why they're analogy.
Yeah.
So I didn't use him at first until until I was really needing a tank, and then he kind of became my tank. Or I should say my frontliner. Spoiler, essentially everybody I used in the party, like Pascal was the most tank-y up to that point for me, and he was he was like a hybrid for me, not even like a full frontliner per se. He just could be a bruiser type. But everybody else I was using was a ranged type, so I needed somebody at least up in the front for them to have to run past or at least engage with while my ranged did their thing. And I guess the other reason for that too is Argenta rapid fire. I wasn't trying to shoot into my allies, so a bunch of melee units would have made that a bit more difficult in terms of positioning, or I would have had to like use points to do skills that made her miss allies or whatever have you. But anyway, back to Heinrichs. So he was a character to me in terms of personal interactions. I know in most of these games, right, it's players are gonna romance characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was, I think, the first character I ever felt like this character's trying to romance me, and I have like, I'm not here for it.
Yeah.
But like he's trying to romance me. Like I don't think in any game I've had where romance is an option, it feels like the character is initiating the romance on the player.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually like you have to say one flirty line, and then they'll start trying to romance with you.
Yeah. You have to turn it on.
Or yeah, you flip the switch. You initiate. I felt like Heinrich was initiating, and I wasn't really here for it because I was, again, at the time, I thought I still had a chance with Cassia, and then and I know we're gonna talk about her in a moment, but when I found out I couldn't romance Cassia, then I had a couple others I was looking into, and then just magically I was in a relationship with Jay or Jai.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I blinked,
Yeah.
and I was in a relationship with her. I'm like, wait, I didn't mean for this to happen, but for the sake of play, I did. At that point, in that moment, that's why I looked up. I was like, can I romance multiple people, or can I break it off and then not negatively affect things? And they were like, you can romance as many as you want, but there will be a point in like chapter 5 where you have to make a decision. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. I'm not going to go back on this table. Let's just let this play out. But anyway, more on Jai in a minute. But for Heinrichs, so yeah, for his so that's the personal interactions with him, and then like his companion quest, story quest, him taking me out to go deal with somebody else in the Inquisition who's gone a little rogue, gone a little heretical, and you get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. That was an interesting one, and then him having to end her after he talked very affectionately about her in terms of their past interactions, being in the academy or whatever at the same time. And how her photographic memory is just, even among photographic memories, like the best. So because of some of those decisions I made for his character quest, he ended up being more merciful, more sympathetic, which led to, I'm sure, some changes in dialogue when it came to like trying to get information or torture other characters in certain story moments.
Okay. Yeah. I again played a dogmatic character, so kind of went the opposite from me. But again, just kind of rolling through here, we have a Jai, and she's sort of the rogue trader analog character, scoundrelish character.
Yeah, so she's like I said, I blinked and I was in a relationship with her, and I think that's a good summation of personal interactions and her personality, her type. She's kind of like the rogue trader if rogue traders didn't have as high, if rogue traders weren't official and have all this high status and stuff, that's what she is. She's the rogue trader of the underworld.
Yeah, more I know I called her a rogue trader, but I think it's more like she's supposed to be the some type character, Han Solo type. Right. But anyways, if you don't have much more to say, we can blow right by.
For combat purposes, I didn't use her that much because she is also an officer archetype, and I was an officer archetype, and I was using Cassie, who was an officer archetype. So I figured, already got 2 of us, don't need her. You stay safe on the ship, baby. You don't have to come in because we're in a relationship. You stay safe. Just be there for me when I come home.
Yeah.
Until we eventually broke up. But anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, now sort of the curveball. The next 3 characters are all kind of curveball characters. You're lit?
She was my single target workhorse. If I needed somebody picked off, she was it. If Argenta's my MVP, Irlet's number 2. Before Argenta got as powerful as she was, so probably like mid chapters, like chapters 2 through the end of 3, Irlet carried the game for me. Just the damage output, hitting targets consistently and from range, she was a beast. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense that the Warhammer universe refers to, as. I mean that in a complimentary way. She was fascinating to me because of obviously how she wraps into the main story and the betrayal and everything like that. Uh, because I was playing the good guy route, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, forgave her, worked with her on her reconciliation. And so her character growth, because of that, I think was one of the most unique and interesting ones from the game because of all the revelations she goes through and the evolutions she does. And her romance too, I think, is unique as well. It's like the least horny romance because it's all about the mind and your soul, and it has nothing to do with physically. In fact, if you make a physical gesture towards her, you cannot romance her.
Look, you're a disgusting monkey, and they have no time for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, I'm an Ellen talk. It's a little bit more respectable now.
Ah.
So yeah, so really enjoyed her both from a character perspective and then also the player and her story arc. I had the intention, I guess, of actually romancing her because I was using her in the party, and I was like, maybe there'll be some interesting one-on-one dialogues while you're traversing the overworld or something like that. Because Jay wasn't in my party, right? And so I never had that. But I come to find out after I beat the game, the achievement did not pop for finding your true love, so I messed up somewhere, and I did not actually romance her, which led to a very sad ending for her. I was a little disappointed, but 83 hours in, I don't know where I messed up. I'm not going to go back. So
fair enough.
It is what it is. But really like the character. That's your let.
Okay. Now our Space Marine character, Ulfar.
Okay, so to save time, because I know we're going on for a bit. To save time, I'm gonna throw Ulfar, Malzakai kind of into the same bin here.
Perfect.
In that they came on so late in the game, I did not develop any attachment to them. I did not even like play around with different builds with them. I literally just kind of looked up a build for each of them online that seemed to be popular and did it because I wanted to make the little green arrows go away, and also because I had to take them with me for the companion quests. That's literally the only time I used them for combat was their companion quests, and when I had to. That was it. As far as like character relations with them, I didn't use them, didn't resonate with them. Ulfar was he's basically your stereotypical dwarf in every fantasy game ever, just bearded, yelling loud, for honor, for glory of battle, just like stereotypical there. And Mal's being essentially a dark elf, he's sadistic and in all this pain and evil stuff, and he rubbed my party the wrong way. I almost felt like I need to get him out of my retinue just to appease other people, kept him around for completionist sake of doing his quests. So I didn't really get involved too much with him at all.
Okay. I will say it is almost heretical how much you're like, Space Marines? Bah, who needs Space Marines? They're just basic bitches. Whatever.
Now, I mean, they're stereotypical in terms of just that archetype of they got a lot of braided hair, they're loud, they like to drink and feast, and they want to die a glorious death in battle. They're stereotypical dwarfs. They're just large and in giant spaces.
Again, I would have preferred a different Space Marine chapter than the Space Wolves. They're very boring to me, but I get why they chose them. They're fairly popular for exactly that reason. But regardless, those are the characters. We've covered actually quite a bit of to a certain degree, the story.
Still a few characters, technically speaking.
I mean, you can cover anyone else you want to. I was going to go into plot.
So let's just touch on this very quickly because there are technically some other characters. There's up to, I believe, I've read afterwards, 3 secret characters that you can get. I did obtain one of them, and that would be Chorda. So Chorda is another rogue trader. She's similar to Argenta in terms of her build, in terms of how you're built in game. Lore-wise, completely different, but in terms of how they play, very similar. I think I used her for one quest just to use her to see what she did. But outside of that, the character herself, I didn't really love her when we first met her. She's leans into the dogmatic, like to a cruel fault almost in terms of justice being blind and administering justice indiscriminate of any other factors. So I didn't love that. And then when she ultimately takes over Footfall, and ruling that with an iron fist, that I didn't obviously, since she joined the party later on, I didn't kill her. I basically exiled her, made her see the error of her ways and how she's fallen off the path that she wants to be on, and made her do some self-reflection. So I appreciate that she had some redemption story arc there. That would be one of the secret characters you get. It's the only one I got. The two others are Winter Scale, and then I don't remember.
Erlon the Cruel. He's basically, if you go.
Oh, that's right. He's the heretical path guy.
Yeah.
So obviously didn't get him. And then the other character, I'll use air quotes here, Nomos.
Oh yeah.
So this will kind of give away the ending that I took, but I did let Nomos learn more. I let Nomos, kind of have his freedom, right? Like Common Class, have his freedom. And then end of the game, he took over the Tech Priest's body. The Tech Priest wanted to sacrifice himself and let Nomos take him over, so I let that happen. And then ultimately, for Nomos, let him take over the Satan and basically become the protector of my realm, which is why the Imperium didn't love me.
Yeah.
But now I understand a little bit more why, especially after you said what you said. But those are all the characters I want to talk about, and that kind of gets into the plot in terms of what my ending was. But we could talk about some of the little endings, or where do you want to go with the end?
We'll talk about the little endings, any that you want to cover, and then you mentioned that you wanted to talk about pacing, because I think chapter 3 sounds like a sticking point for you, just based off of how you've brought it up over the.
That's fair.
So let's do that, and then we'll call it a day. It's a long game. We could probably talk for much longer, but
yeah, like I said, I'm a completionist. So yeah, the 83 plus hour, I did every side quest, I explored every planet, every quest. I got every reputation maxed out. I did every planet development through stage 5 in terms of whatever path I chose that to unlock. So obviously the projects that get blocked out because you picked something that's antithetical to it, obviously I didn't do those. So I did everything. So there were a lot of little things in the endings that things that I did, affected. And I appreciated some of the, even the most minute things you would thought, this is a one-off. It would have, a little line in the ending. So I do appreciate their attention to detail in terms of what you're doing affecting the ending. I don't have any specific endings, per se, to really talk about. I was, like I said, I mentioned the endings and how kind of showed how brutal the universe is with, Argenta. Irelet, because I didn't actually romance her. That ending ended being a bit different than I was expecting, because she ends up going with and forming a sect of corsairs, and then her and Malzakai or whatever, the Dark Elf, they end up going off and hunting together, kind of, and then they reminisce about the old days, which I thought was an interesting twist, because they can't stand each other during the campaign because they're poor often.
Yeah.
And then the other really sad ending too was Malzakai. This is also part of the reason. It's man, I should have just gotten rid of him. He kills Abelard's granddaughter and sends her head to him, and has just from an old acquaintance.
Yep.
And I was like, it's brutal and completely unnecessary. But yeah, so those little things just kind of showed how brutal the Warhammer world is. But that's kind of all I really wanted to point out regarding the endings. But to move to talk about pacing. So yeah, I've kind of alluded to it, and you picked up on it, so I was less than subtle. Chapter 3 for me. So I guess to back it up, right? So you have your prologue, chapter 1, kind of introduction to the game, a lot of the mechanics and everything like that. Do a good job. And then you have, like I mentioned earlier, your oh shit moment. And then you move into chapter 2, and it's the whole expanse. And you can travel, you can go everywhere that you want to go. You can do things, side quests in really any order. And the only thing you're really time gated or locked into doing is after you visit those 3 planets, you essentially have locked into, okay, you're going to the next thing. So I appreciated that open flexibility. And again, in exploring all this, whenever you do go to a planet that you're going to land on, you can change your party. You can go to the bridge at any time. The space battles are even fun and strategic. I enjoyed the space battles. It's just, again, very free and open stuff. Now we get to chapter 3, and completely takes all that away. You're essentially, for lack of a better term, or to put it in the most layman's terms as possible, you're in a prison, essentially.
Yeah.
You can't escape it. You're just in the doldrums of this one world, and you're separated from your party for the first part of it. You have all these injuries and traumas and stuff which hinder your combat abilities. And also, me being an officer type, not the main fighter type, uh, made this section a little bit more difficult and a little bit more frustrating, if I'm being honest. But once you start getting your party members back and you're able to heal yourself up and things like that, okay, fine, at least I have my party. Then it was an issue of it's just very linear, similar to, I think I've talked about this in the past with Genshin, and in terms of, and then I made a reference to Final Fantasy 13, and we talk about big AAA games when they have a linear path. So that was the joke of Final Fantasy 13 was you had your 8-hour tutorial that was very linear, and generally people didn't like it. And then you have a gacha game like Genshin Impact, very open and all this exploration. You know, and you expect that open exploration. They've already introduced it in a Rogue Trader. They've introduced the exploration stuff to you, and then they confine you to this linear path. You can't access for a while. You can't access your equipment. You don't even get your base equipment back for a while, and then you do. And originally, from my understanding, when you got your original equipment back, you then had to equip it manually yourself. Like, so you better remember what everybody had.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a pain in the butt. They've patched it to where you'll auto-equip everything back how it was, which is a good quality of life improvement. So good job by Owlcat for that. So appreciate some of those little things they tweaked after the fact. Good. They're listening. That's it. We appreciate that. But for chapter 3 for me, again, just being very linear, not having that exploration, not having the freedom to really change up your party, because it's literally, which from a plot point makes sense. From a plot point, it makes sense why you can't change your party, because the idea is you're captured, you're thrown into essentially the prison, and so the only people in the prison would therefore be the people that were captured, which would be the people that were in your party at the end of chapter 2. So that all makes sense, again, from a plot logistics standpoint. From a game perspective, hate it, because I want to be able to try things out and do different things, and because it's still relatively early on in the game, and I don't have like the huge powerhouse in Argenta that I had once we got into chapter 4. She was good, but she wasn't great at that time. I was still rotating, subbing people in and out. But yeah, so that's kind of my gripe with chapter 3. And then once we get back to chapter 4, then we're back to the massive exploration. There's not as much to do because I've done a lot of it in chapter 2. So and essentially it's wrapping up a lot of the companion quests and traveling around doing that. So that's kind of my gripe with chapter 3. The only small, and this is a small gripe, that it would be a good quality of life thing is, once you've made a path completely safe on the Expanse map and you're traveling star system to star system, if I want to travel to a star system that's 15 star systems away and every path is safe, just let me directly travel there.
Yeah.
I have to manually click each one along the path, visit, travel, visit, travel, visit, travel, visit, travel. And so that's a minor inconvenience that I feel they could change and adjust. You could technically make a custom path essentially from whatever main hub to whatever main hub. And essentially it would be then 6 navigator points, because you do 3 to create it, but then it's deadly, and then you take 3 navigator points to make it safe. So you could technically do that. I guess would be the argument against allowing me to travel one click through all the safe paths. But I don't know. That's my small gripe. At the end of the day, I enjoyed traveling star system to star system. I enjoyed perusing all the different systems and the planets, and even ones that didn't even have quests to go to them. They were just random like things you stumbled upon. Like there was one that was a bunker, and the gimmick of the bunker was you would trigger something, and every second your team was taking damage. It was like it's the only place that real time was an actual factor. And then you eventually figure out a puzzle to turn off the gas, though I think mine bugged out because then I kept getting hit by the gas even though I turned off the valve. But ultimately it wasn't horrendous, and it wasn't so bad that the health ticks weren't so bad that it was ruining the experience. I was able to fully explore it, get out, fight the gun turrets that are there to await you at the end, which were surprisingly tanky. I ended up actually just buying time while I had somebody run to the control panel and turn it off, because that was easier than doing minimal damage to a big metal gun with big metal bullets, But yeah, that's my gripe on chapter 3 and some of the pacing and the gimmick of that chapter. But everything else was great in terms of enjoying the game. I was always looking forward to, okay, what's the next story event? What's the next companion quest? What are my choices going to be? How's that going to affect character development or the plot in general? And then I was very excited about the ending and like the different routes that could go. But did you have any other specific questions that you wanted to get into on the story?
No, no. I think that's good. I could probably go for another 2 hours talking about Warhammer, so that's why I've been probably a little bit more quiet than I normally would be. I don't want to take over the conversation to geek out about minor details that the majority of our audience probably don't really care about. So I've been kind of just
we can discuss it off recording here.
Yeah.
We'll geek out on our own time. Okay, so that's it for the plot story then. Just any other questions you have for me in conclusions, or I can just kind of wrap up. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I guess before you give, or how about you give your final thoughts and then I'll ask my question.
Okay. So my final thoughts for Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader. I think one of the initial reviews I read, very much being the truth. I very much got Baldur's Gate 3 vibes in terms of playstyle and things of that, character development and everything. It's just this game didn't have 10 years of, behind the scenes development to become as great and kind of the standard flag bearer that Baldur's Gate 3 was. But it was still great to me because I love those types of games that are strategy RPGs, that are choices matter and affect outcomes. I love big, long games like that. Combat was fun. Like I said, characters were really well written. The game did make me want to kind of go back to Dark Tides and play Dark Tides again, because I wonder if I will pick up on more things and little subtle things in that game that I completely missed because I literally think about the franchise. I just, gun goes shooty. Like maybe there's some things now that make more sense in that game. I think I may go back and play it down the line, and if I do, I'll probably go do a heretical playthrough, just to kind of see what that has to offer. And I know that going that route, I now know, I should say, because I've looked it up after the fact, that going that route will make me lose certain party members that I really relied on in this playthrough. So I think it would make the game more challenging as well, without having to notch up the difficulty to the hardest tier. But yeah,
That's fair.
Really enjoyed it. I would recommend it for those that enjoy strategy RPGs. Again, even if you're blind like I am, know the Warhammer 40K IP and the lore. You can enjoy the game and on its own merits. And if you lean into the Warhammer lore, then it's just even more enjoyable.
Okay. And I guess my final question would be, did it interest you in Warhammer in general? Not necessarily going out and playing the tabletop game or whatever, but could you see yourself picking up something just because it is Warhammer in the future?
Yeah, so knowing some bits of the lore, I would say if there was another game that came out, like I said, I'd be interested in going back and trying out Dark Tide again, and maybe picking up on a bit more of the references in there. Or if there's another game that's out there. I can't say that it would make me want to pick up and read a book. I'm not a huge reader in general. It's more my wife is the reader in the family. And yeah, as far as the tabletop game, I probably would want to ask you, how do you even play the tabletop game? But it does make me want to go back and look and see if there are other Warhammer games on Game Pass that are more strategy based and potentially try those out.
Yeah, because I know that Space Marine 2 came out recently, and we're going to be getting Space Marine 3. So I don't know if those have hit Game Pass, but
I don't believe they have. I did see some things with Space Marine 2 and people speaking very positively of it, and then some of the one-liners or the passive dialogue in that game was cracking me up. So I'll probably look deeper into that, and if it ever comes to Game Pass, I may dive headfirst into that. But I think that's going to do it for us here this week. We want to thank you guys for joining us here this off-banner week while we're out. Let us know, down below if you guys have played Rogue Trader. If you're big fans of it like Steve are, maybe you guys can coordinate something going on there in the Warhammer gaming universe. Or maybe you're a blind Warhammer newbie like me. and just trying it out for the first time and want to learn more, let us know down below. And if you enjoyed the episode, you'd like to show your support, you can always like, follow, subscribe to the channel. You can email us at brohoyopod@gmail.com with questions or suggestions for the show. And of course, like I mentioned, we have the Discord in the description. We have the link down there. So you can be sure to join us over there for news, game nights, and content notifications. I'm going to leave the next episode up to a mystery as to what we'll be talking about in our next off-banner episode. But you can be sure that it's going to be some fun discussion in depth on something in the gaming space or entertainment industry. But until then, keep gaming.
We made a choice, go fight against your fate.